Hello everyone and welcome back to the Arsenal Pass YouTube channel. It is Hayden here and I've just returned from the calling Taipei where I competed in the Classic Constructor calling playing Dromai. And this weekend is actually going to kick off, or this coming weekend is going to kick off the ProQuest Season 4 around the globe. Everyone vying for that place to compete in Pro Tour LA happening in March next year. And I wanted to bring a video to you today of the decks that I think people should be on the lookout for, or if you're still stuck, unsure what to play for your ProQuest this season, what decks you could be looking at, and why you might want to play those decks. The meta has been pretty defined by Lexi, and we're about 3 weeks out from Lexi hitting Living Legend, and it's going to continue to be defined by Lexi, it looks like, in this ProQuest season, as well as calling Dallas, which is about to happen or kick off shortly after this video posts, as well as calling Melbourne and a couple of Battle Hardens, of which the Monday after the Melbourne calling, we will say goodbye. We will say our farewells to Lexi. I don't know how fond they'll be for a lot of people, but we will usher in a new meta. Until then, though, it looks like the ProQuest season will be fairly defined by Lexi, but that's not to say that Lexi is the only deck to play. And I'm going to share 5 decks in this video that I think are definitely worth looking at and playing, and for different meta considerations. I think right now in the meta, you do have to consider that you do need to have a game into Lexi, and whatever shape or form that is, whether that's a decent matchup to a really good matchup, whether it's the sole reason you pick the deck, or in your meta, maybe you've got a lot of other decks being played that isn't just Lexi. Maybe you've got a lot of Dromai, maybe you've got a lot of ninjas floating around, maybe you're seeing Icelander, maybe you're seeing Bravo, for instance, and that could be, you know, a reason to play some of these different decks. So I will talk through, as I go through all of the 5 decks, you know, the meta considerations I would have when choosing whether or not to play this list. But I do like all 5 of these lists, and I think these are 5 lists that I would play in my ProQuest. I have ProQuest this weekend. I'm planning to play minimum of one of these over the next 2 weeks. We'll see how we go. So before we dive into it and break down these 5 decks to play for ProQuest Season 5, I do want to give a shout out if you're enjoying the content that we do here at Arsenal Plus. Please, you know, best thing you can do to help us is drop a like on the video, make sure you sub to the channel, and even leave a comment. You know, let me know what you think of these 5 deck lists. Any of these 5 decks ones that you want to play? Is there a 6th deck out there that you think I should be considering that I've missed out on the list? So let us know what you think. With that said, let's get into it and look at some of these 5 decks for ProQuest Season 4. All right, the first deck on the list has to be the winning deck list from this previous weekend at the calling Taipei. Now, Lexi dominated the meta at Taipei. It was the most played deck. It had the best conversion into day 2, or had the most decks converted into day 2, and one of the best conversion rates into day 2. But ultimately, despite putting 3 copies into the top 8, Lexi did not win the event. Instead, Azalea, a different ranger, went and won the event in the hands of Justin Q. And I think this deck is, I think it's a great deck list. I got to watch Justin pilot this deck in a couple of matches, including the final where he did beat Nick Butcher on Dromai. And I think if you're looking for a way to particularly target rangers, I know Justin played a lot of Lexi matchups, ranger mirrors on day 1 and day 2, including taking out ranger in top 8 as well. And this is a deck list that can really prey on the Lexi meta. So I think if you are looking for a deck in particular for a heavy Lexi meta, the first place that I would be looking is potentially to be looking at playing Azalea. And this is the Azalea list that Justin piloted. So kind of some of the standouts for me, I think, is just a really solid kind of core game plan. You know, you've got the pumps in the forms of like the Lace Withs, Frailty, Blood Rot. You've got the Premeditates, of course. Read the Glide Path is a card that I absolutely love. I think that Opt 1, on top of what you get the Opt off of your Sculpin Crosswrap, is just super, super valuable to dig for the important arrows, the important pump cards that you do need and want to see. And then Tarpet Trap. Tarpet Trap is this really interesting sort of sideboard card that we're seeing a lot of rangers pick up again. Was adopted early on in the ranger meta and has sort of dropped away and then come back again into vogue as we head towards the end of this current format and Lexi heading towards Living Legend, particularly for Lexi mirrors and Lexi decks, and then also for Azalea into Lexi, as well as other decks that can go wide and have those go again clauses. So Tarpet Trap is fantastic in that matchup. Definitely like seeing 3 copies of that. And then other than that, you know, like I say, just a really sort of good call list playing Sigils, playing Sink Below, so a little bit of defensive package, CNCs, as well as the Battering Bolt. So a good number of poppers in there as well. And if you do want to see Justin playing this deck into a Dromai to sort of see how that matchup can go and check out the final of Calling Taipei. A great match. Definitely recommend it. So this is a list from Justin. I really like this. I think, as I say, if you're looking to target Lexis, this is the sort of deck that I might start with. In fact, I would probably start with is Azalea. But also your matchups into Dromai, as we've seen, is not poor. Bravo is definitely a hard matchup and probably your hardest matchup. Icelander is a good matchup for you as well. So you do have a pretty good meta spread. Azalea is really powerful. Azalea does have a really good spot in this meta. And I think post Lexi going to Living Legend, Azalea is going to still be in a really, really good spot. So if you are looking for potentially a deck to invest in, not just for this ProQuest season, but heading forward, past Lexi Living Legend and into the next format, as we head out the rest of the year and into heavy hitters next year, Azalea looks like it's going to be a really good spot. So I can definitely recommend this deck list. They always say if you can't beat them, join them. And if you are looking for the best deck in the format to play, then it is Lexi. It just hands down the best hero right now to be playing is Lexi. And if you're looking for a particular list to go out and play, then this is a Lexi list that I've put together that I've been testing and using sort of iterations of this in our testing. And Lexi has really evolved from, inception and kind of the emergence to dominance at Pro Tour Baltimore for the kind of next few, I guess, iterations of the meta we've seen up until now, where in 3 weeks' time, Lexi is going to Living Legend and head out of the format. Lexi has really continued to evolve. The way that people play the mirror has evolved. The cards that people use for the mirror has evolved. The meta around Lexi has evolved. Obviously Ultim was there at one point, hit Living Legend. That changed how Lexi looked even more, as we went forward. Then it's got to deal with Dromai. The meta has continually evolved, but Lexi has been a mainstay this whole year. And I think right now, the list that I would look at is something very similar to this. This is a list that I'm very much in favor of. So I'll kind of just break this down and talk about why some of the cards are in here and why I think, if you're looking for a Lexi list, if you're looking to play the best deck in the format right now, why I think this list is of particular sort of interest, I think. If you don't like this list, though, you can definitely go and take any of the 3 lists from the Calling Taipei, 3 of some of the best players in the world, to be honest. Brody Spurlock, Alan Lau, and Nova Chan, 3 very, very good players putting themselves into top 8 of Calling Taipei with Lexi, so you can go check those lists out as well. But I'll break down my list, and sort of the first thing is, you'll notice in this list, we're playing Tunic and Sunken Treasure. I think you still want Sunken Treasure into Dromai, and it's not just because of cards like Warmongers. It's also because of Tumultide. Once you get Tumultide and you lose your New Horizon, Trench is one of the most important cards you can have to make sure you can filter out and not Arsenal lock yourself. Things like Heat Seeker, things like Ponders, making sure you can use that card that you put into Arsenal or get stuck in Arsenal and get resources out of it, get something out of it. And Trench is super important for that. The next is Quiver the Abyssal Depths. I think we're seeing a return to Vogue when it comes to fatigue against Lexi. Quiver the Abyssal Depths, Remembrances, these sort of packages fell out of favor in Lexi's, and people adapt, right? And people have gone back to looking at fatiguing as a potential opportunity for beating Lexi. We saw it actually in Taipei this last weekend. We saw a number of players, whether it be on Azuri, whether that be on Bravo, whether that even be on other decks, which I will talk about another deck very soon, looking to take advantage of the fatigue route when it came to Lexi. And so I like Quiver the Abyssal Depths. I think it's a 1-card ad that can help really, I wouldn't say solve, but fix sort of aspects of fatigue. If you play really tight, you can often get around those fatigue plans fairly cleanly. So big fan of that. 1 Arctic Incarceration. I think this is a card that falls out in favor of other cards. Now, Arctic Incarceration, I don't particularly like in the mirror, but I do think it is good in other matchups. And drawing multiples is often bad, I think. So 1 is a good place to be. I like it against decks like the Redline Dromais, for instance. I think it has value against other aggressive decks that aren't Lexi, to be honest. I think you have better cards in that mirror. But Arctic Incarceration are one of there. Then we have 5 poppers, 3 Command and Conquer, obviously great in the mirror, plus, just a good popper that can then also attack and present a threat into Dromai. Death Touch, I like having 1 Death Touch. Death Touch has kind of been falling in and out of favor for people, but I like having access to that 1 Death Touch for the Codex plans because it is a lot of damage. It can threaten 8 damage with 1 card, so, some of the most damage you can present off 1 card in your deck. 1 copy of Down and Dirty, just rounding out the poppers there. And then other cards I do like, and I think people should be playing right now, is Icequake. I think just really good into the aggressive decks, but also poses a problem when you are playing against decks with defense reactions. You can go taller, avoid breakpoints, and then present multiple effects that then put that Frostbite on the board for them and force them to either have to block out or not be able to do the turn that they were playing into next turn, particularly things like Redline Dromai, for instance. Lightning Press, this is kind of like the 6 popper a little bit as well. You can target Lightning Press on your blocking card, on your defending attack action to make it go over 6 power and pop the attack, but also beyond that, just a good piece of combat trickery. And I like keeping those, again, pretty tight because you don't want too many non-attack actions, not too many non-arrows in your deck. You've got to be careful. You 3 of a kind into a bunch of non-attack actions and instants. That's not great. Premeditate, I think another card that's come back in vogue and a card that I really, really like. Really big fan of Premeditate. That +3 and threatening that Ponder token, that draw card, equivalent of around a +5 from 1 card as threatened is really, really strong. Withering Shot, great in the mirror. And then Tarpa Trap, as I talked about before, coming back in. And the last couple of cards, Cold Snap, adding a card that can target the opponent's arsenal, can really attack the opponent's arsenal and force them to use a resource to be able to use that arsenal, is really good against the mirror, for instance, as well as just more Frostbites for aggressive decks. And then Widowmaker, think Widowmaker is a really interesting card. It's a card that can help you clear dragons at blue, which is really interesting. 5 attack. They can't throw cards to it, right? So it's always going to 5 attack when attacking dragons. But then also in the mirror, just as when you draw multiple blues, potentially off a 3 of a kind hand, this one represents 5 damage and either forces 2 cards or throws through 5 damage. So I think Widowmaker is a card that people should be looking at a lot more. Even the red one could be of interest to me, to be honest. All right, we've talked about 2 of the most sort of potent decks in the format, the Codex decks, the Rangers in the format right now. Let's go a little bit off key, a little bit off the track a little bit, and let's talk about Katsu. Now, Katsu is really interesting. Katsu was really heavily prevalent in Taipei this past weekend at the calling. These were very sort of proactive, aggressive lists. And I think the list I'm going to show you, this is kind of the wild card entry into these 5 decks for ProQuest Season 4. This is one that I think can have success. This is a defensive Katsu deck. This is going back to the days of the kind of turtle Katsu decks of old. And this one really focuses around leveraging Flick Flack in a format where decks are starting to go wide again, and decks are starting to not have the threat density they used to. So this Katsu deck can actually win either by just chipping away, defending, and then chipping away with Kodachis plus a few attacks, or can actually run your opponent not just out of cards, but out of really good red threats, whether that's red arrows in the Lexi deck, that's red attack actions in the Ninja Mirrors, and also then has this kind of package, which I'll talk about for Dromai, to make sure that you don't run out of cards yourself. So you'll see a lot of defense reactions in this deck list. You've got 3 Fate Foreseen, 3 Sink Below. We've got 3 red Flick Flack, and then we've also got 3 blue Flick Flack. I really like blue Flick Flack, especially against the Rangers, particularly Lexi, because you can throw a card plus a blue Flick Flack for 5 to block out an arrow, and then your next card blocks for 5. So you get to cover 10 damage for 3 cards, which is really good on defense. And then you can come back in with either your 2 Kodachis off a blue, or something like a 0 for 4 with a card such as Flusterfist Red, or, you know, if you've got that tunic counter up, come in with something like a Pounding Gale, or you get to come in with Mauling Key. And I think this card is one of the cards that's kind of changed this archetype and allowed, well, given the ability for this archetype to potentially come through and exist in ProQuest Season 4, this new round the table 1 for 5 combo card that works with your Flick Flacks, plus just gives you good damage threshold. The other card as well is Bittering Thorns Red, another 1 for 5 threatening that can make things like your CNC come in for 7, for instance. So, you know, you can 3-card hand, blue into Bittering Thorns, into CNC, threaten 11 damage plus an on-hit, 3 cards. Really, really powerful. So, yes, this deck can do good defensive things. See a lot of poppers in there as well. Command and Conquer, Down and Dirty, and Fendel's Fighting Spirit. Also just good attacks. But then beyond that, you do also have access to Spinning Wheel Kick, Bittering Thorns. You do have the Hurricane Kick, Leg Tap, Knee Thrust line. You do also have access to Surging Strike, One Wind Gust Wave, Mugenshi line, and that Mugenshi line, Lord of Wind line in particular, is what's going to help you keep your threat density high against decks like Dromai, who might try and traditionally run Katsus out of threats. You can control the board early, and then you can make sure that Mugenshi, One Wind Gust Wave, and Mugenshi hit on dragons, so they can't block it. Go get your Lord of Winds, shuffle back cards into your deck to give you that threat density. Visit the Flying Dojo also does, Visit the Floating Dojo also does the similar thing and can really help into things like the Bravo matchup. So I think this deck list is really interesting. It's one that I've been testing with a little bit. Against Lexi, your main game plan is to be very defensive. Unless you get on the front foot and find spots and you can just start to absolutely hammer them with damage, then you can go back to defending when you need to. And you can either just kind of chip away at them and find turns where you can push damage when they have off turns. You can punish them for them trying to set up with off turns because of cards like Bittering Thorns, Surging Strike, Spinning Wheel Kick, etc. Then on defense, you have such good defense with these defense reactions and Flick Flacks that you can kind of play this joint game, either run them out of red threats or actually just kill them. So that's the deck. I think this is a really interesting one. As I say, it's my wild card for ProQuest Season 4, but it's one that I've been testing quite well, and I think is an interesting kind of off-meta call coming into this first weekend of ProQuest. I spoke at the start of the video about playing Dromai in Taipei this last weekend at the calling, and to be honest, Dromai is still one of the best decks in the format. I think it's the second best deck in the format. I do think Lexi is the deck to beat, is the best deck in the format, but Dromai, probably the second best deck in the format, although I think Tome has kind of changed the landscape a little bit and not necessarily positively. Although that being said, Tome is a very, very powerful card, and I think you do have to play it, because if you don't have it and you play into the mirror, you are going to suffer. Plus, it just helps matchups like Dash, for instance. And Mechanologist is definitely on the rise. We saw Dash being the third most played deck in Taipei last weekend, so definitely, you know, the meta is shifting and evolving. So that said, Dromai I think is still a great pick. I think as well, if you are someone who is a bit more of a traditionally patient player, and you might have played some of the Dromai lists of old, similar to maybe what I played at Nationals to top 4. You can go check out that deck tech. It is up on the Arsenal Pass YouTube as well, although we do have this updated deck list, which does include tomes. And this is a bit different to what I played in Taipei. This is kind of a move on. I think in Taipei, I went really hard in a deck list that went super sort of into the tome build, really just focused purely on Tome of Imperial Flame. And I think I've pulled it back with this list. I think you need to find a bit of a middle ground. We didn't play Crown of Providence, which is one of the cards you notice immediately in the equipment slot. And I think you really need that for particularly the Azalea matchup. I like it against Lexi when going second instead of the Imperial Tome plan when going first. I like it against Bravo as well. So Crown of Providence comes back into the list. Beyond that, some of the other cards that are new besides just Tome. Obviously, you notice a lot less blues in this list than some of the Dromai lists of old. And when you are playing Tome, you tend to cut down to around 3 blues as well. We've got a bit of a defensive package as well, which I definitely like maxing out on when I'm not playing Tomes as well, and then reducing a little bit when I'm playing Tomes. But you can see we've got access to 1 Flicker Trick, we've got 3 Fate Foreseen, 3 Sink Below, an Oasis Respite, and a Sand Cover. And then beyond that, we have the 2 Dust from the Chrome Caverns, a really great piece of tech now into Bravo, but I also think it's relevant into the Brutes as well. Able to set up kind of this Chromai Miragai kind of, not lock, but you get Chromai Miragai down with Dust and they can't pop either, and you can start to go to work. So really like that kind of duality plan there. Back to 2 Burn Them All, I played 1 at Taipei. I think you do want 2 Burn Them All in the deck. The card is very, very powerful. And other than that, we're just kind of maxing out on dragons. The one omission is that Necria is not on the list. I think Necria is one of the worst dragons in the current meta. It used to be the best in the mirror, and now it has fallen away in the mirror because of the Tome plan sort of being this snowball sort of plan. It's really fallen away. And then we have access to Cadaverous Contraband, which is basically our kind of 4 through 6 poppers for the mirror, but also a card that can clear dragons and then put back on top either your best dragon that's in your graveyard, or just put Tome back on top so you can keep those Tomes rolling. That's the Dromai list. That's the Dromai list that I'm currently looking at playing, and I've been messing around with post Taipei, iterating and trying to find. It's really hard to find, I think, the balance of these Imperial Tome aggressive redline lists and a more patient sort of value oriented list. And I think there's a middle ground there, because I think the aggressive lists get really punished, particularly in matchups like Icelander, particularly and honestly matchups like Lexi. If you don't get a good start, they can just absolutely punish you if you don't have that defensive package and the ability to see yourself through to the mid game and get value out of your dragons. And on the flip side, if you don't have Tome and you have these just traditional sort of Dromai sort of value lists, then you just get absolutely destroyed in the mirror by the Tome plans, and also potentially by decks like Fi, who can just get off to the races and say completely goodbye to you. So I do think there's a middle ground here, and this is the list that I'm currently rolling with and looking at for ProQuest Season 4 Week 1. Okay, last up, a hero that has featured a few times in these ProQuest decks to play videos that I do. I've done one of these, I think, every ProQuest season, even maybe a Road to National season, and Bravo has made an appearance a number of times. It's a returning favorite, and Bravo is a very interesting spot in the meta. Now, you might hear us on Arsenal Pass talk down a little bit on Bravo from time to time. Now, that mainly might be my co-host, Brendan Patrick, but I have also been down on Bravo from time to time. However, in this meta, I think Bravo represents a very interesting player. And we saw it just come off the back of a top 8 at Taipei in the hands of Chia Yongtek, and I think his list is very, very interesting. So I want to break that down, and I think this is a list that, well, Bravo in general is a hero that I would look at if my meta was pretty open. I think Bravo is a very, especially this list, it's very proactive. I think if you're expecting ranges of Lexis, of Dromais, of Uzuris, of Icelanders, of Fires, of everything, then I think this Bravo list might be one that you might want to consider, because it does have game quite wide across the field with its proactive plan. So first thing you'll notice, it does continue to have the Anathos as the main weapon, but that Titans for Steelblade Buckler plan is still available to you. And then you go and look through the cards. Now, some of the new cards that have made its way in, Outmuscle as an extra sort of go wide card has made it into this deck on 2 Pummel in this list that Chia is playing. And then you have Lunging Press as well. So another way to push through these breakpoints on some of these on hits, particularly things like Crippling Crush if it's the last card, things like CNC, of course, Chokeslam. So I think this list is quite clean that Chia's put together. I think if I was looking to iterate on this list at all, I think I've seen, or in fact, I played against some of these more proactive Bravo lists in Taipei, and I think one of the cards that has been omitted from this list in particular is access to the Enlightened Strikes. I think those are usually really good. Sometimes they can be a bit awkward in Bravo, but they're particularly great against Dromai, and I think they're particularly great in Guardian Mirror matches, which you might start to play as Bravo gains back some popularity in the meta, and maybe even a third Pummel is another card that I might look at. If I was expecting more mirrors, more Staunch Response could be the other card that is looked at alongside Line Strike. So that's the list. Buckling Blow, you can see there is kind of, there's a Buckling Blow buckle package for killing that New Horizon out of the Lexi decks. Now that is hard to pull off because I think they a lot of time are going to play Perch Grapplers against you, but with a card like Lunging Press, for instance, sometimes you can definitely get that off. So I do like this build. I think it's very interesting. Civic Footsteps has been, or Civic Steps, sorry, has been a really big gain for Bravo in this meta, I think. So yeah, this is a list that I definitely think is worth taking a look at for ProQuest Season 4. Again, if you're enjoying the videos that we put out here at Arsenal Pass, then make sure to go and sub to the channel, drop us a like, sub if you aren't already, and yeah, let me know what you think of these 5 decks for ProQuest Season 4. It is week 1 this week. It is, you know, I won't say it's wide open because it's not. This meta, Lexi is definitely defining the meta, but it's not necessarily dominating the meta, which I think we kind of expected it to. But time will tell over the next couple of weeks of ProQuest, and as we head towards calling Dallas-Fort Worth this weekend, and then into Melbourne in a couple of weeks' time. Plus, we do have a couple of Battle Hardens in between, or we do say a fond, or yeah, as I said before, maybe not so fond farewell to Lexi in this class constructed meta. I'm going to be playing ProQuest this week. I don't know which of these decks I'm going to play. I really want to play this Katsu deck. I think it's really interesting. I'm not sure my meta is going to be as conducive to that. I don't think there's necessarily going to be a lot of Lexi and Dromai, which is why I would pick up that Katsu deck. I think it has a great game into those 2 decks. But, you know, if I'm expecting to play into Bravos, for instance, might not be the deck I want to play. So that's a consideration. Anyway, those are the 5 decks. Yeah, again, as I say in the comments, let me know what you think of these 5 decks. Have I missed something? You know, are you an Azuri fan or maybe even a Rhinar fan and you're expecting to maybe see those in the list here? Let me know. But until next time, we'll see you in the next video.